Thanks for being here. This one is going to be on my Porsche 356 again. These are the pedals. It's the brake and clutch pedal that is a spare for my car. My car is currently out at a paint shop getting some things fixed on the paint. So while it's gone, I thought I would restore as many spare components as I could. So when it comes back, we just simply swap them in. This one has some wear to it, so I think it's a good candidate for rebuild, but it's not super rusty. Typically on the bottom, they're either got holes in them or this bracket is completely trashed. This one's in pretty good shape, so let's get to it. Stoddard does make a repair kit, but this is not in the parts diagram. So these bushings are very thin. I've done some 911 pedal restorations before, and they have much thicker bushings that are meant to be replaced. On this one, I'm not so sure this is meant to be replaced, so stick around, we'll figure this out together. I also sourced these little rubber bumpers. That is something that gives you some cushion. When the brake pedal comes back, it gives you some cushion so it's not metal to metal. So these go right there, and there's two of them, one for the clutch, one for the brake. The other thing that's interesting about this assembly is this was separate with it. This typically goes in between the pedals. Why this is separate, I do not know. I don't know if this was put together without it, if this has been restored in the past, but in order to get this on, you have to take apart this assembly down here. So there's a few weird things about it. I don't know if this is how they all are, but this piece has been staked in, so it is not removable. And I don't think we want to remove that. I don't see a bunch of wear in this assembly, so I think that's fine. To get this apart, we're going to start with the clutch pedal, and we're going to take apart this roll pin right here. That should allow the pedals to slide off. And we're also missing the bolts that attach these arms to these arms. This pedal is loose, so it's not stuck. These things are loose, but typically there are two bolts that thread into there to clamp the pedal down. The clutch pedal has those two indents on it, and that's what locks it in when the bolt's in place. So there's two different positions for that one. A little penetrating oil in that seam, and then I think we could spread that apart just a little bit. Yeah, that comes right out. So it looks like this also has the two indents, but one pedal is certainly longer than the other. So we'll remember that the shorter pedal is on the brake, but who knows if this has been assembled incorrectly, so we'll keep an eye on that one. It looks like the arm on the inside of the tunnel there is designed to not go over center. So if this is the clutch position, when it's all the way down, it goes to just about the top of its travel. So we just want to make sure we put it back together the way it is. It would be pretty difficult to put this in backwards, but you could do it 180 degrees. The other thing that's missing on this is there's a push rod for the brake master cylinder, and this assembly didn't come with it, but of course I have one in the car. There's just a little cotter pin that holds that on, so nothing really to restore there. That's just something to note that this pedal assembly is missing that. And in order to hold this and so I can get that pin out, I just have it on a block of wood, and I'm just going to clamp it to my table. This is the punch I'm going to use to push that out. And you can look at the new pin just to make sure that this punch is smaller than the pin, so it's going to pass through. Okay, that was not too bad. And I'll talk more about this pin in a minute, but this seems like it's the original pin. And let's just give this some more oil. So this should now rotate on its cross shaft. So now we're just left with the holes. And I think the idea is to break this free by rotating this against this shaft. It should just rotate out. Just wiped off the shaft and we're looking at it for any particular kind of wear. And I'm only seeing just areas where the bushings make contact, but there's really no significant wear. You can't feel any reduction in diameter here on the shaft. The only thing I can see is that this hole here is slightly mushroomed out. Maybe when the old pin was pushed out, it kind of pulled some metal with it. So that might need to be dressed down just a little bit, but we know that the clutch pedal is a pretty tight fit on here. It doesn't feel so bad. And then there are no bushings inside the clutch arm. It's just a tight fit to the shaft. But the brake pedal does have some bushings in it. So I think those are the ones that we're going to replace. And the grease is all yucky and old. I don't know if these are the factory bushings or not, but it has some pattern to it for grease retention. There's like a little checkerboard inside there. So this fit onto the shaft is just a little bit loose. It's not horrible. You know, it's just a little bit loose. So I think while we're here, we'll renew these bushings, put new grease in it, repaint everything, and then, like I said, we'll never have to do this again. This looks like it's in pretty good shape. And then this does look like the correct spring, so I thought before I paint all this, I should practice putting this on so that, yeah, it looks like it just wraps around there. So that's not that hard to put on, which is good to know. And then this guy was going in this direction. And then this is a tight fit, but it'll go on just like so. And kind of keep that spring from falling out. So now it's time to remove these bushings that come in the kit. So it looks like there's one there and there's one there. The fit of this is, you know, slightly loose. I can wiggle it here near the clutch. That's where most of the forces are. So this one certainly needs to be replaced. But it's not horrible. And then this side is a little bit loose, but once again, not horrible. I've definitely seen worse pedals. With my pick, I was able to remove this washer. So that was between the pedal and the bracket here. Pretty tight fit, kind of a thrust washer. And then to remove this bearing inside there, I have, this is, I'm in the US, so this is 5/8 tube, and it fits pretty easily in there. You could potentially use the actual shaft to help push this out. So if the bushings are worn enough, you can get the end of the shaft to push up against that. The problem is that this one is rounded on the corner, whereas this one is a slightly smaller diameter and the end is cut square. So I think I can just tap that out. I think the smaller ones are going to be the harder ones. Let's do those first. Doesn't want to come out that direction. Let's try this one. Let me move the camera because it is moving. See a little bit of it coming out there. Okay, so there's one of them, and these look like they have a little split in them. So now that that's out, it's going to make the other side a little easier. So we'll always want to go with the easiest one to remove first. So this came out pretty clean. I don't even think it damaged them. And then just for comparison, here's the new one from Stoddard. And it is a little taller, but appears to be the same diameter. So I think that's fine. And then these have like a low friction surface inside. So it does fit pretty nice. The only thing left to remove are the bushings inside the brake arm. And this time we got the big vise out. So let's see if we can hold this down. Now, same idea. This is a piece of electrical conduit. It's like an inch outer diameter, measures, I think 935 or 25. But it's, you know, it's kind of a loose fit in there. It's a little smaller than the factory one, but it's got a sharp edge on it. So I think I can just push the end of that bushing out. Let's see. That's what's left of that bearing, you know, lots of old grease. So I think this is a worthwhile upgrade, even though this wasn't super worn. Just a little brake cleaner on that, and we'll make sure we inspect this surface, make sure it's ready to accept the new bearing, but I can't imagine there's anything wrong with it. So the bore is in great condition. Nothing is gouged or worn or hammered on. This seems like it's ready to go. Couple marks on there that I put in, that was just from the wedge tools, but that won't affect anything. It was just kind of getting it apart. These are nice. This is like a forged brake pedal. Really nice. I'm gonna go ahead and put these in before I paint them. And then a block of wood, we'll just drive it all the way home. Now this does have a hole in it, but the hole is not important for what we're doing here. This might be for an earlier car, I'm not sure. You could use a press for this. I have a press, but it's not really worth getting everything configured. We just pretty much hammer it flush. We're almost there. Let's check it on the shaft and make sure it's nice and tight, which it's, to be honest, it's not super tight. It's about, I don't know, almost the same as it was before, to be honest with you. It might be slightly tighter, but not much. Same thing with this bracket. Let's get this installed. These are going in without any effort at all. And there is feels like a step down inside there. So this will only go in so far. That's it. The problem is there's a portion that still sticks out. Now this one does feel tighter. You know, it's clearly loose, but it's tighter than it was before. So it seems like most of the wear is on the clutch shaft and not so much the brake pedal. But I'm gonna sand this flush because what I don't want to happen is I don't want this bearing material to start cutting into the clutch fork. So it makes sense to me to make that flush kind of like it was originally. Kind of doing this so the burrs go outward. Now with this washer removed, there is nothing else to possibly take off this thing. These bolts here are welded on, so this is as stripped as it'll get. And I'm gonna take most of the rust off with my wire wheel, but I may also hit this with my spot blaster because there's gonna be some real tight areas there in the corners that it's almost impossible to get with power tools. Okay, so things are generally cleaned up just with the wire wheel. I can epoxy pretty much on top of this. The hard to get spots are gonna be hard to get. So like the corners, the inside of this cavity, I'm gonna use a spot blaster. So I just load some sand into here and I take it outside. I'm not gonna film this section because it's super messy and that's bad for the camera and bad for everything. So I'll be right back. Let me show you the setup. So I don't have a blast cabinet, but I just put out a tarp and a face shield and I just go for it. I do end up collecting some of the sand back. It only took one of the little blue bins there. For paint, I'm using this epoxy primer and I have parts A and B here, equal parts. So just gonna mix these together and paint this right away because the metal will flash rust like almost immediately. So I'm gonna wipe it down with wax and grease remover and get this sprayed on as quickly as possible. So all those nooks and crannies have been taken care of. So we are ready to shoot this. And then I need to tape this surface because that's what the bearings ride on. All the parts have dried overnight. Everything's painted and just waiting to get reassembled. So things came out pretty good. The gloss is, it's a semi-gloss. This is, I think, fine as a top coat. I don't think I'm gonna top coat this, even though you can. Sorry about that fan in the back. It's really hot today in the garage. But anyways, epoxy primer is great for stuff like this. I use it for almost all the black. If it's something that might see brake fluid or it's just subject to like heavy use. Some people will powder coat these. You could just spray them with a rattle can. You can do all kinds of stuff. And by all means, do whatever suits you guys. My rationale for using epoxy primer is that it is chemical resistant. You can put it on heavy or thick. I did 3 coats, like for example, on the bottom of this, which is usually subject to a lot of rust. This gets sandwiched between the floor pan and the pedals, and you get moisture down there and they can rust. The water will not go through it and rust cannot get through it either. Some of the other reasons for epoxy primer that I like is that it's easy to mask, it's easy to control where the paint goes. In fact, underneath this like axle area right there is really hard to spray. Even with the spray can, you're not gonna be able to get underneath this axle, but it was bare metal. So with epoxy primer, I'm able to brush it on in some areas like underneath that axle, which I did. I brushed some on there, so I got complete coverage. Even powder coating is gonna have a hard time getting complete coverage on that. The other thing is sometimes the metal is heavily pitted, like on the bottom of this. This is, heavily pitted. Also, like on my horn grills, they need to be sanded, filled, and top coated or covered again with more epoxy primer. So you're able to do filler and things like you can't do with powder coat. As with all my videos, I'm not saying this is the only way to do it. There's 100 ways to restore a car. This is just my rationale. You guys can do your own research and pick what suits you, but I do like epoxy primer. Way better than POR 15. It's way better than even my Rust-Oleum mix, which I'll do another video in the future kind of comparing all the different paint systems and when to use which one. I also have the ability to do powder coating at home and also Cerakote at home. So we'll be doing some things with Cerakote, maybe even on the horn. Epoxy primer, just like powder coat, does require a toothed surface. So either sandblasting, 80 grit sandpaper, some of the stuff that after I wire wheeled it, if it was smooth, I would hit it with the sander. If it's pitted, I usually don't sand that because it's hard to sand in the pits anyways, but you have to have a mechanical tooth for almost anything to stick. The epoxy primer is like the preferred base for most car restorations for the exterior paint. So if you're doing a multi $10,000 paint job, chances are epoxy primer goes direct to the metal as the foundation. So it's sandable, it's got good adhesion, it's got good barrier protection. You can do all kinds of touch up with it and stuff. So that's why I like it. These rubber plugs prevent stuff from getting inside the bearing surface. And then this is the outer surface that the pedal rides on. So we'll make sure that doesn't get gummed up with paint because we want to have just grease on that. Take that plug off. I think that's it for this one. Same thing on this. There's plugs on either side to keep those new bearings from getting all mucked up with paint. Nice and easy. This is another bearing surface that we don't want painted. We just want grease on this. The grease will protect it from rusting. And then this guy here still pivots. Even though I painted it, it still works just fine. This is the original spring. I painted this as well. You could possibly plate this, but I don't recommend that because this is a high strength steel, and if you plate it, it can become embrittled with hydrogen and it can crack. So I don't ever plate springs. I just leave them painted. And this is that thrust washer too. We'll put that on before we forget. It goes right there. This is the push rod surface for the master cylinder, so I left that unpainted as well. I like this Redline CV-2 grease. This is super high pressure for CV joints, but it is a synthetic. It never is gonna dry out or get waxy. So this is what I prefer for the pedal assemblies or almost anything. Load up this grease into all those little pores that is provided by the Stoddard kit. And we can wipe off the excess later, so go ahead and put a lot on there. Gonna do the same with the axle, just make sure it's well lubricated. The spring has this leg that goes inside that slot right there. So I find it a little bit easier to put that on the slot first, and then we'll just slide this over. And of course we're gonna, potentially scratch the paint, but that's okay, we can touch it up. Boom. I don't even think we scratched it, that's good. Now that the spring is on, I can go ahead and put these bushings on, or these bumpers on. There's two holes here for the bumpers, right there, and they go in this direction. That's gonna limit the travel of the brake pedal coming back towards the driver. So we're gonna squish that in there, and I'm gonna use a little silicone oil on this to make sure it's well preserved and also slips in easily. So just gotta kind of hold that out of the way. Slip this in there. There's one, and there's two. So now when we push the brake, you get this nice feeling when it goes back. It doesn't clunk or anything. It's just a real soft, silent brake system, which that's gonna make it drive and feel a lot better like a new car. This base was sandblasted, so I'm doing another pass to make sure there is no sand in here, because that's the last thing we want for this bearing surface. So this should come out pretty clean. Just push that through. Yeah. Now these have a direction because remember I filed one side, so these should fit flush just like before. And I'm grateful these parts exist, but I do think they should fit tighter. Filed side goes out, slips right in. Same thing, we're gonna pack those grooves with the grease. That's designed to, I think, retain grease as long as possible. And then a little extra grease is not gonna hurt because it's kind of like a rust preventer. So we'll just get it in there. The inside of this tube is not coated or painted or anything, so just wanna have some protection on that. It needs to be protected with grease, otherwise it could rust and make it really difficult to get this pedal assembly apart again, even though it's highly unlikely this is ever gonna come apart again. Okay, so this is going together from this direction. Whoop. So I'm also coating the thrust surface. There's some wiggle back and forth, so that's just got a little extra grease on it too. We need to squeeze that on without damaging everything. So I'm doing my best to line up these holes beforehand as we squeeze it on. This is the same orientation as it was when we took it off. Remember, this was leaning forward when the clutch is in the up position. And then these tapered pins are great at lining that up. This one's a little too big, but let me get the right one. Okay, now it's time for the pin. And this is what is, I think, also an important step here. So the old pin and the new pin are slightly different. Number one, the new pin is longer, but it's a split pin versus a roll pin. And I don't like the split pin ones, especially on the 911s, because these are known to break. They are not as strong as the roll pin. So if anything else, I would recommend reusing the roll pin over this new one that comes in the kit. I actually have a bag of these from McMaster Car, and I'll put a part number either on the screen or down below in the description, so you can also order a brand new roll pin. So the clutch pressures on a 356 are pretty light, and the idea of shearing off a 356 pin is pretty small, but I know on 911s, especially like on Mac, my yellow one, it has a aluminum pressure plate, it's a high force clutch, and you can shear these pins off. If you don't believe me, here's some evidence. Broken clutch pin. Here are the pins. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It probably came with 10. I know I just put one of these in my 911 pedals. And they are tapered on both sides. This side's tapered and that side's tapered. So the installation is actually pretty easy. So it turns out that I had to use this transfer punch to line up the holes a little bit better. This punch was bottoming out on the arm and not the axle. So I basically found something that was pretty close, put a sharp point on it. I drove it all the way through, and now I'm driving the pin in to push this transfer punch out. So hopefully this will work. So this pin was just slightly smaller than the diameter of this. So I know it's well lined up now. Now we just need to drive it all the way in, which is just about there. So I've got it centered in the bore. It's not sticking out on either side, but it's sort of recessed. So it's never going to get snagged on anything. Now, the only thing I could have done better on this in the paint department was to paint the end of this spindle. So I'll just clean the grease off of this and just touch it up with a brush, and we'll be done. So with these bumpers in here, it's pretty obvious which pedal is the longer one, because the clutch pedal now has its bumper on there, but the distance is offset. So the clutch pedal is further towards the front of the car than the brake pedal. That means in order for these to line up, one of these is longer than the other. So my thought is that the clutch pedal goes here because it's longer, and the brake pedal goes here because it's shorter, and that's going to put the pedals at the same position. Now you have a choice between these two positions, and if you're extra tall, you may want to use this one closest to the pedal. That's going to push the pedals back a little bit. It's also going to make it easier to do the heel-toe shifting thing. So that's what I'm going to use. I'm going to use this indent on both pedals to make sure they line up. Just opening that up ever so slightly so we can slide this in. And this will be the brake pedal, which is the shorter of the two. And this is an extra bolt. I'll replace that with the correctly marked bolt from the pedal assembly that's in the car now. And I think that's it. The placement of the pedals this direction are good. In this direction, the clutch pedal is just slightly higher than the brake pedal. And I just think that's the way it is. The arms here are even, but because of the angle, it's just, that's how it's going to be. With the stoppers in place, it's just, that's what it is. I don't think that's abnormal. That's just the way the car is. The gas pedal would be down here, so I guess it slopes down. There is zero play in the clutch shaft. Like there was a little bit play before, now it's zero, and this buffer here on the release is going to be great. There's always a little free play in your clutch, so it'll be, you know, somewhere like that. But when it does pop back, if you step off, it'll just make a nice cushion. Same with the brake. The brake has a spring, the clutch does not. And the brake pedal has some movement in it still, and that's just because the Stoddard bushings don't fit super tight, but I think it's going to be fine. It's not going to make a difference. The brake is going to be just perfect. And then there are some rubber pads that go over these pedals. Some people prefer to not have them on there because it's got this nice waffle pattern, but I have new ones on my other pedal assembly in the car, so we'll just transfer those over to this one. Accelerator pedal is part of the tunnel. It's got its own assembly that bolts up to the tunnel. It's completely independent of the brake and clutch. Thanks for watching.